On today's episode of The Dead Life, you'll be hearing from Kim Coots. She's a reluctant medium, and by that I mean that she came from a corporate business background, and it wasn't until her daughter and then subsequently her mother died within weeks of one another that she began a quest to understand the afterlife. She's going to tell you about her experiences on her journey to live again. You can follow me on Instagram at Medium Allison, on my Facebook fan page. You can watch me on my YouTube channel, and you can see me live in Dallas, Texas on February 12th. For more information, go to AllisonDubois.com. Kim, welcome to The Dead Life. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Can you share with my listeners a little about your beautiful daughter and your mom and how their passings impacted you?
Yeah, so it was in July of 2020, and we were a few months into COVID at that period of time, and there were some, fears around COVID with my family because of some health issues and whatnot. But unexpectedly, my daughter passed away on July 3rd, and that morning began like any other day would. It was a Friday morning. I was just about to get ready with clients for the day, and my phone rang, and it was a call I didn't know the number from, and I usually don't answer those calls, but something in my gut told me to answer that call. And it was my daughter's friend, and he was very frantic, but telling me that they had used drugs and she didn't wake up. And I rushed over there, and unfortunately, the police and the paramedics weren't able to revive her.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
That's very recent. That's very recent too. That's not that it ever goes away for a mother losing a child, but that's not even 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So you must still be coming to terms with moving through understanding what her journey was here and why it ended so early for her.
Yeah, it's definitely been a journey. And I will say, though, that through that process of exploring this journey and how I came into what I know today as mediumship, I still have a connection with her on the other side. And that is a beautiful gift that I'm just so grateful for. And I want to share with other people so that they can experience that too.
Absolutely. I think parents, when you belong to this private club of people who lose their children, it's a club you never want to join, but you have no choice. It's something you're sort of inducted into. And I don't think most people can ever understand what it actually feels like as a parent to lose your child. So I think for you, having gone through that yourself, you're going to be able to help a lot of people that would have been stuck otherwise. So I'm sorry that you lost your daughter and then you lost your mother as well.
Yeah, my mom had back surgery a few days before my daughter passed, and she was recovering from back surgery when she got an infection, and she died exactly 3 weeks after my daughter died unexpectedly.
So have you ever, and I'm just asking this personally, have you ever talked to the other side and said, why did you do that to me? Why did they have to go? Did you go through that soul searching process after they passed?
Part of my spiritual path before this happened, I've practiced shamanic healing techniques and really worked in the spiritual healing space in the closet. I had my corporate career, but in the closet. And those really were helpful for me in coming to terms with it, or at least understanding it, or having a place to start from.
Right.
In that. And I believe that we all have a soul plan and a soul path. And as much as I found it normal for most people in society to believe in God or angels or spirit guides, but when it came to communicating with loved ones in spirit, it wasn't so normal. And I even felt some skepticism around it before the losses that I had. And
Sure.
that caused me to say, I'm willing to look at this in a different way, or I'm willing to be open and explore it.
I always thought healthy skepticism's okay. I felt that way myself, which is why I went to the university to be studied, because I needed to really understand why I was able to do this. And why some other people don't seem to be able to. And I needed to know that I was going to be great at it. Otherwise, I was going to be a lawyer because I didn't see a point. But I think a lot of the best mediums come from a different background. They don't really start out to be a medium. It's just where they end up. So in your bio, you talked about your hesitation around following your spiritual path due to how spirituality played out on TV and was perceived in general. How did you get past that?
Well, when you lose the person who you love the most, it really, for me anyway, it opened up my mind to say I'm willing to look at anything and explore it. But I also wanted proof and wanted to find that for myself. So that allowed me to move past my own ego and my own fear of what people would think of me for me to pursue this. And coming from that corporate background, especially working with, men most of my career, intuition and things like that weren't talked about. And, I worried in the past, I worried about what people would think of me and my
Right.
spirituality. So I kept it to myself, and, I had a healing practice that I worked with specific private clients with. But after going through this experience and not knowing if I was going to make it through this, I mean, it's the hardest experience I can ever imagine having in my life.
That's it's such a 1-2 punch. It's your
It is.
daughter and then your mother. So your mother would have been your support system, but then you lost her too.
Yeah.
And did it bring you some measure of comfort knowing they're together?
Yes. Yeah. They were very close. They were like two peas in a pod. So having that, knowing that they were together and that I can still connect with them
Right.
is healing.
That's great. Oh, I'm glad you have that to hold on to and to find meaning in, because I think we
Yeah.
all need to find meaning in our pain. How did learning shamanic healing help you to process your grief?
Well, through that training, shamans were really what I consider to be the first mediums ever. They were what people relied on to figure out what they could use for healing, what herbs to take. They were the medicine men and women of the earlier people. So I never thought of them as mediums until after I started studying mediumship, and then was like, wow, this is really, shamans were the first mediums.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a different way of expressing it, or a different form of it. But having those connections with the spirit world already
Mm-hmm.
were a doorway for me to be open to receiving and connecting with people in spirit.
Can it be really beneficial though, shamanic healing, for people who aren't mediums as well?
Absolutely.
You find
Absolutely.
that to be effective?
I actually got into it for my own healing and corporate burnout. I was very burnt out as a corporate business executive, and
Mm-hmm.
got into it from that perspective of wanting to renew my energy, and definitely was helpful on my journey with grief and continues to be.
Great. Well, I hope that listeners out there who are going through their own grief and trying to understand their pain, maybe they'll look into some shamanic healing techniques that can help them to process what their experience is and understand maybe a bigger picture and a way to reconnect with the people they've lost.
Yes.
Do you think your understanding of numbers through your business background led you to astrology?
Well, astrology for me, it was more the psychology of astrology that
Okay.
attracted me to astrology, because even as a kid, I wanted to be a psychologist. And when I started learning about the psychology aspects of astrology and seeing how it could help people understand themselves better and kind of give people permission to be themselves, I just fell in love with it.
I love astrology as well. So it's funny though. I've noticed with Gen Z, they're very into astrology. So we've got this whole generation that they know their rising sign, they know what their moon's in. They ask guys, when were you born? Guys know what that means. And I know this from my daughter because she told me this. As soon as they meet a guy and they say, when were you born? The guy's like, no, you're going to ruin my chart. You're going to judge me. So I think it's kind of cool that there's a new generation coming in that it makes total sense to. So
Yes.
you officiate funerals. I'd imagine that your spiritual approach to death is a great comfort to the families. How do you think more spiritual funerals differ from the norm Does it help families to move through their grief more easily with a spiritual funeral rather than more of a standard, you know, mourning type of a funeral?
Yeah, I never set out to do funerals, by the way. That wasn't something in my life path that I had planned on. But all of these things that have unfolded are, I feel like just what my soul's path is. But in the funerals that I've officiated, and even in the weddings I've officiated, people have different spiritual backgrounds and beliefs. And for that person to have something that represents them
Hmm.
in a way that not every, every ceremony does, but having a ceremony that represents them, I found to be very healing for the families. And um, I know for me with my own daughter, I officiated her funeral as hard as it was because I really wanted to do that for her and represent her and add in what would be important to her.
That sounds unimaginable to me because even speaking at my dad's funeral when he had passed was challenging. So for it to be your daughter, um, my hat's off to you because I don't know that I would have had the strength to be able to keep my voice from cracking in a watershed moment of, falling apart up there. So that
It
had
was
to be life changing.
It was very difficult, and it was during COVID, so at that time, we could only have small funerals. There were
Right.
not a lot of people officiating. I would have preferred someone else to do it for me so that I could be there for my daughter that way. But in what was available with COVID, I decided that I wanted to do it for her and created a ceremony in a way that really would be something I think she would be proud of and represented her and
Well,
her
and
life.
I think you also would have a really good understanding being a medium and bringing people through. They do talk about their funerals and they talk about showing up, and what they really enjoy is hearing the stories that people tell about them, the funny stories, the aha moments that they had throughout their life, and the funny pictures of them making faces and how they were liked and their last birthday, just like parts of their life. They want to hear about it. So when you do something that's more tailor made to the person and their personality, I just find it doesn't have that morose feeling, that weighs you down to be in a funeral parlor, with it being so, it almost is soul sucking. I don't know how else to put it. We just went to a funeral for our friend Bob Bondurant. He was a race car driver. And so, I mean, that's to put it mildly. I mean, it was kind of a bigger deal than that, but they had all of his race cars there, and, he had his helmet on, and he was, in his racing gear. And it was just kind of cool to see. They had the video display for him of his career back to the 1960s. And it was just very him, the way everything was done, the music, the videos, and it's exactly what he would have wanted to have had. So I hope as people start planning funerals, they maybe do it in a way that isn't the way it was done in the 1950s, but more come into the, new century and make it about them. Have a margarita fountain. If you want a margarita fountain, do what you want. Who are they? Tell us who they are through what's in the room and the music and the surroundings. And I did that with my dad's funeral. He always had a pinstripe car. And I was looking, I know this sounds sort of morbid, but I had to pick out his casket because I was his only child. And there was one with pinstriping. And I said, that's my dad's. That's my dad's. It was navy blue with like gold pinstriping. I'm like, who even does that? But it was, it was very him and very cool and great. So I hope people keep in mind that they can make it really what they want and don't have to
Yeah.
stick to the plan. Um, can you tell us about your work as a certified grief counselor? Do you find that healing for you now?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I became certified in that, it was before my mother passed. And at the end of that training, I felt like I don't feel I don't feel like I have a right to coach people on grief if I don't even know where they're at. Like the training was really helpful, but there
Right.
was just something about it for me to say I don't know that I can help people with it other than through the ministerial work that I did as a spiritual peace minister. I found it helpful there, but it really was after my mom and my daughter passed that I could really see how all of these pieces, whether it was from officiating funerals, grief coaching, shamanic healing, like all of these pieces started coming together on how I can work through my own grief, but also help other people as well.
I think that's amazing, and I don't know if you found this to be true, but I think you just kind of alluded to it a little bit in what you said. Um, until you lose somebody, you don't really know how the people that you're counseling feel. And it was one of the messages I got after my father passed, that I needed to understand what my clients were feeling. And I hadn't lost anybody that close to me before. So I think my dad would be happy to be the inspiration for all the kids out there in the chapters that I've written about losing a parent and how I processed my grief and how maybe that can help others as well. But I know that part of the reason that my dad had passed then, and I was wondering if you think also maybe that's one of the reasons you had the loss experience that you did, was to really fully understand on a soul level how the pain feels for those who have lost someone that you are trying to help.
Yeah, like I said earlier, this isn't what I planned to do with my
Right.
life, or, I didn't set out to do this. I never would have imagined I'd be on a podcast talking about this right now. This is where my life has led. And um, interestingly, my daughter, when she was alive, she loved foreign language and she loved studying and speaking foreign language. That was her passion. And now, as I've studied mediumship, I work with her on the other side. So she laughs and tells me that she is still an interpreter and translator, but just in a different way than she ever imagined and expected. So,
I love that.
yeah,
I mean, and my dad helps me with readings, and I'm sure your daughter helps you as well. If you need
yes.
them to fine tune the living person or the energy of the person you're bringing through, they can turn up the volume for us. So it's kind of nice. Do you have any inspiring accounts from your experience with the terminally ill?
Yeah, I do. A friend of mine had a son who had found out he had end stage cancer, and I was doing some spiritual counseling with him. He did end up transitioning, but before he transitioned, I had a this experience with him. He was sleeping, and I was in this like mountain setting with him, and he was there, and I was speaking with him, and I had asked him if he was going to be staying or going home, and he said he wasn't sure, but he was thinking of going home. It was just a really interesting experience. And when that ended, and I left the hospital, and I didn't plan on telling his mother this, but it came out. And later, when he woke up, he told his mother about this dream, and it described the same exact thing. And it was very healing for her to hear that. And when he did transition, she felt a little better than she would have had she not known that. So it was a way of comforting for her. And it was very comforting for me, and I think for him too, in that process. But there are several shamanic journeys that I've done with people. There are techniques called soul retrieval that help people to reclaim some of the energy that they've lost through their grief.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of amazing spiritual techniques out there to help with grief.
And do people just Google that? I mean, where do they find it if the listeners wanted to look into that?
Well, there's training to do it yourself, or there's shamanic practitioners that you can find to help facilitate that for you.
Okay. I mean, I've never done that. I've never done a shamanic healing and I live in Arizona where we have Sedona. So like if I wanted to do it, it's right there, at any time. But that sounds nice that they can actually give you some of the energy back that you lost in your grief. Did you find that that filled you up on some level, being able to sort of restore some of your energy that you had lost? Or do you need somebody else to do that for you if you're low on energy?
Well, you can learn how to do it for yourself. I did both. Part of it I did for myself, but I also worked with a practitioner to help me. It's challenging when you're in your own grief and working through it on your own. To have someone that can help you
It's
is
hard to
definitely,
imagine.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
But having that energy restored to the point where you can, you know, work on moving on and processing things, and having that capacity to do it.
A lot of people aren't wired to be there for terminally ill patients. It just takes to, especially sensitives. I find a lot
Mhm.
of sensitives have trouble, myself included, being around people that are in pain. Like we pick up on that, or the people who died in that bed before that person died. You know, the multiple people who have passed in that hallway, in that room, whatever. It becomes collective and powerful, and you pick up on that. How do you shield yourself in those moments to be able to help them transition over and not take that home with you?
Well, I see it as a natural process. Death is a natural process,
Hmm.
and help and being there and holding space for them. So it's really not about me. It's about being there for them. And as far as the energetic part of it and not carrying it home, I think it just ties into my beliefs around things, and I don't know, I think just for me doing it for so long, it's just
Right.
kind of become, second
Second
nature.
nature.
Yeah.
That's pretty great. So, I've had hospice nurses on my podcast before, and they have the most colorful stories of when people they've spent time with pass, or even that they have a favorite patient that call them anytime, day or night, they want to be called in if something goes downhill with that patient, because that's one of their VIPs. So I just think it's interesting to hear the stories from the people who really are the kind of the gatekeepers of the soul, and helping the human experience to evolve onto the next level, and the things that you remember. And they often talk about, they'll say somebody's name, at the time that they pass, as if they're in the room. Have you experienced them recognizing that there are people around them before they pass?
Yeah, that's pretty common when they recognize people in spirit around them before they pass. And there is something sacred to me in witnessing that for people, and how they are reflecting on their life, and are in that period of transition. But it's very common for them to see that.
I often tell people who are trying to make somebody comfortable who's going to transition, the music from the people's youth, from when they were young, when you play that for them, it almost seems to open up something inside of them, like awaken a part of their soul from the past, the part of the young them. And it seems that they're happier while they're spending those last few days. They're more at ease, having something familiar that's stirring emotions in them, like the songs that they loved when they were 18. So, do
Oh.
you play music as well for?
I don't, but thank you for the tip. I think that's a beautiful way to celebrate their life, and for them
Yeah.
to feel that energy from that music and that time.
Well, in the pictures of them when they were young, and the people, like even a sibling maybe they lost from, 1955, as soon as you start showing them those pictures, they tend to awaken something inside of them that wants to make that connection, and they'll start talking to that person. So it sort of lines them up with the person who is probably already in the room anyways, but makes it real for them with the visual of them from back then that they still carry inside of them, and the music and the memories and everything goes together. So
Yeah.
it seems like a stage setting experience from what I've heard from other people who uh, do help people transition. I've been there for a couple of people around the end of their life before, and spent some time putting the pictures up and playing the music and holding their hand and doing that. But it was not easy. And
Mm.
feeling the cancer in them for me was the hard one, when they're really deteriorating, and being able to leave that behind. So I always tell people that work in hospitals or in hospice, I'm like, you got to do a visualization technique after you leave. If you take a shower, bath, whatever, but visualize the pain and the cancer going down the drain away from you. And I'll even say down the drain away from me. And it really does release something inside of you so that you don't carry it and it physically manifests in you, the energy of their illness. I find that important. Have you experienced that?
Yeah, and I think just from practicing for so long, it's like I said, second nature, but there are a lot of things that I've learned and done to protect my energy and make sure that my energy is in a good place when
Right.
I'm around other people too, for
Yeah, you
sure.
have to protect yourself because if you don't take
Yeah,
care of yourself, you can't take care of other people. So it's very
yeah,
important. And I think a lot of people that work around illness and mental health, people with mental health issues, or anything that's sort of a heavy energy, they often don't recognize how much pain they're carrying inside of them by being
yeah,
in those environments. And so I like to remind people, cleanse yourself. It's more than just burning sage and sweetgrass. You've got to give your intention to the other side and tell them what you need from them. Take the pain from me, take the illness from me far away. And it really does lighten your energy. So I hope that helps some of my listeners out there.
yeah,
Where can
definitely.
where can people find you if they want to follow you on social media or learn more about your work?
If they want to learn more about my work, they can find my website at kimcoots.com. And on social media, on Facebook, it's at kimcoots.com, DOTCOM. Instagram is kimcoots_.
So, do you have a new book in the process, or like what are you working on right now? Is there anything for them to look forward to?
Yeah, I do have a book in the process, but first I have a couple programs that I'll be offering, and then the book will come after that. I wish I could do everything all at once, but really feeling called to do a program for people
You've had
who,
a lot on your plate.
yeah,
It's
wanting
understandable.
to do a program for people to help them with transforming their grief and connecting with their loved ones in spirit.
Sounds important. I will
Yes.
look for that. So, well, Kim, on behalf of me and my listeners, thank you for sharing your vision of life after death with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
When your book comes out, you'll have to come back on and talk to us about it.
Will do.
Thank you.
Thank
Well, I'm
you.
Allison Dubois. Until next week on The Dead Life, be well. And to all of my believers out there, don't stop believing.